Hello, everyone. This is the Sun Bookshop coming from our lounge rooms to your lounge rooms with our book recommendations this week. This week, we're very excited to have a special guest book recommender, and that special guest is the fabulous customer of maybe 22 years since the shop opened, Kate Marquard, who we love, ex-librarian, fabulous reader, all-round good person. So, Kate Marquard, over to you.
Hello, thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I'm a little bit nervous, haven't done this before except in front of kids, and it's a bit different with this sort of audience. I just love the Sun Bookshop. It is one of the best places to go to, and I'm so looking forward to being in there again. Both places, the Sun and the Sun. Thank you, please. The book I want to talk about today is The Fire of Joy, roughly 80 poems to get by heart and say aloud by Clive James. I was interested to get hold of this book after reading an article in The Guardian by Rachel Cook, where she had spoken to Claire James, Clive James's daughter. Claire talked about her father's last operation and how it was really awful because he couldn't really see, which meant he couldn't read. Whatever the size of her father's problems were, this was not a small thing. Words were his life raft. But all was not lost, she said. The resource that he did have was the poetry he knew. He would recite some, people sitting with him would read the poems to him, and Clive James would often talk about why a particular poem was important to him, where he had first heard it, or point out what were the most difficult bits to say and recite. So from this small beginning, the poems and thoughts were gathered. Claire said the book is about how poetry sounds, the fact that poems are supposed to be said aloud. And for me, this book is so rich in detail, so splendid in its content, so interesting in the poems chosen, and Clive James ever interesting, insightful, occasionally challenging, and often humorous comments. This book has enabled me in so many ways during this new, complex COVID times that we're in. Since the lovely Sun Bookshop people delivered it to me, I've been reading and reciting poetry out loud. I've been standing on my deck under my quince tree. I don't care about the neighbours, and away I go, because some of the poems are just fantastic. I want to quote from the introduction to explain the title, because it's really interesting. The French expression, this is Clive James's introduction, the French expression feu de joie refers to a military celebration when all the riflemen of a regiment fire one shot after another in close succession. Ideally, the sounds should be continuous, like a drum roll. I first saw a feu de joie performed in an Australian army tattoo in the main arena at the Sydney Showground while I was still in short trousers. I saw the ceremony performed again on the parade ground in Ingleburn, New South Wales in 1958. Symbolically, the fire of joy is a reminder that the regiment's collective power relies on the individual and vice versa. Imprinted on my mind, the succession of explosions became for me an evocation of the heritage of English poets and poetry, from Chaucer onwards. It still strikes me as a handy metaphor for the poetic succession, especially because in the feu de joie, nobody got hurt. It was all noise. And noise, I believe, is the first and last thing that poetry is. If a poem doesn't sound compelling, it won't continue to exist. This is an especially important thing to say in the present era, when the pseudo-modernist idea still persists that there might be something sufficiently fascinating about the way that words are arranged on the page. Clive James also tells us and reminds us how to read a poem out loud. There's an excellent list of 6 rules, which I think everybody should read who's going to read poetry out loud. And the first poem that he has in the book, it's a very short one, but it's called Western Wind, and I've never read or heard it before, and the author's not known. Western wind, when wilt thou blow, that the small rain down can rain? Christ, if my love were in my arms, and I in my bed again. James then goes on to list more than 80 poems that he wants us to know, to read aloud, and for me to talk about. And then there are also his interpretations of the poems, which is just fantastic, and I love it. It's a special book from a very special writer, author, critic and poet who's given us all so much. I don't love all the poems, but certainly there are many of my favourite poets and poems within these pages. He also has a really interesting, important postscript at the end, which is called Growing Up Poetical in Australia. And it's, you know, it's a lovely statement about his love of this land and that he was never able to get back to. And this book, I think, should be shared and savoured over time. I have immense gratitude to Clive James, to his widow, Prue Shaw, who originally had the idea for this book, and to Clara and James, who edited this very, very special book, but also to the Sun Bookshop for being there and providing me with the books that I've requested each time, and someone coming and knocking on my door and having a little bag with my books in it. It's been very special, and posting them out, which is also really wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you, Kate. That was fantastic. Oh, I think you've really raised the bar on book recommendations for us.
That's a very, very special book.
So I am going to review today, and I know that I can't do this book justice. There's so much in it, and it's The Living Sea of Waking Dreams by Richard Flanagan, which I've just read, and I've got to say I feel pretty devastated by. There's a tiny glimmer of hope, but oh my God, this is a hard book, but an amazing book. It's a hard book to describe. It is about Anna and Terzo and Tommy, who are siblings. Their mother, Francine, is in hospital. She's very ill. She's dying. Terzo and Anna are high flyers. Tommy has always been around for his mother, looked after her. And Terzo and Anna fly into Tasmania and decide that she is going to live at all costs. And so begins this constant medical intervention to keep her alive when really she doesn't want to be alive anymore. At the same time, there's so much in this book. It is about the way that the natural world is disappearing, and we are so great at being busy and looking at our phones and just ignoring everything that is disappearing from us to our own detriment. We can easily distract ourselves, so we do not care about it. It's amazing. It's such an incredible book. I read the other day I read a review that said it was a masterpiece. Maybe it is. It's so, oh my God. Anyway, I think everyone should read it. Might be a wake-up call. Put down your phone, read a book. Okay. Edie.
Today I am very excited to be able to talk about one of the Sun Bookshop's favourite children's authors, one of my favourite children's authors, Nova Weetman. We're talking about her book, Sick Bay. We're throwing back to Nova today because her family have been going through a really hard time. So I also do want to tell you all that from now until the end of the year, we will be donating 10% of all the sales of Nova's books to the family. But really, I just want to tell you about how much of an incredible writer she is. So she writes middle grade and YA novels, and I have read all of them and just have loved all of them. So her most recent one was Sick Bay, which is one of our favourite books of last year, and it's about two girls, Riley and Meg. Meg, who uses Sick Bay to hide away from things at school. She will go there as her place of retreat when things are all a bit too much or when she doesn't want to talk to the other kids. Whereas Riley, the new kid at school, has to go there because she's a type 1 diabetic, and every time something goes a bit wrong, she's sent straight down there. So they're very different. They're there for very different reasons. And it's about how they meet, how they clash, how they get on, and how that unfolds. But Nova just writes characters so well, in terms of you just really want to know more about them, what their stories are. She writes how situations unfold. I think that one of the most difficult things about writing for a middle grade audience is being able to talk about big issues while also managing to leave behind everything you've learned as an adult writer, because you need to be able to write characters that are just experiencing these things as a child, learning about them. And Nova manages to put big, huge issues, feelings, all sorts of things into these innocent eyes of children learning them, and just how all that unfolds. Her other series or companion novels, The Secrets We Keep and The Secrets We Share, is about Clem, who's having a really hard time at home, and what it's like to have an emotionally unavailable parent, and so much more. But it is perfect for that audience. We've actually done so many of Nova's books for book club, and kids just really relate to the characters. They find it really fascinating seeing these big things explored on a page. There's funny moments, there's moments that will touch you, there's all sorts of things. And her writing for young adults is incredible as well. So Everything Is Changed is about Jake and Alex, these two boys, and from the beginning, you know, something has happened, something's gone wrong, they've done something, and it's told backwards from there, and you get to work out what they've done and how they've ended up where they have. So I really recommend all of her books to anyone who's interested in reading this. I really recommend them for the target age groups. They're always on our favorite list, but again, also as an adult reading them, really love them. So Sick Bay is my recommendation today, but I also think that you should look back into the backlist. And yeah, we will be donating that 10% to Nova's family for the rest of the year. So thank you all very much for listening to our reviews today, and hope you've all had a great week, and we will see you next week with more.